Well, welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Well, it's official. The U.S. Embassy in Israel now resides in the capital of Jerusalem. Political and religious leaders celebrated the event, which took place on the 70th anniversary of Israel's founding.
The historic moment was marred by violence in Gaza, where protesters charged the border fence with Israel. 58 Palestinians died when Israeli forces responded. Chris Mitchell has this report on the day's events.
Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin unveiled the seal, and Ivanka Trump introduced the new embassy.
On behalf of the 45th President of the United States of America, we welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel.
In a video, her father, President Trump, said his decision acknowledged reality.
Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it historic.
What a glorious day. Remember this moment. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
Ambassador David Friedman hosted the event and told CBN News how he felt about the historic day.
We've been planning for this for 25 years, and thank God it came. It was just an incredible moment, one that will probably take me weeks for me to process all my emotions.
After nearly 23 years, the Jerusalem Embassy Act has been fulfilled, with the Embassy of the United States of America here in Jerusalem. But some say it's not just history in the making, but also prophecy in action.
We're seeing prophecy unfold. I don't know when the Lord's coming back, but I know today it got a little bit closer.
This is also a prophetic moment because God promised Israel in the book of Deuteronomy, concerning the nations, I will make you the head and not the tail.
Others saw it as Israel taking its place among the nations.
One of the most visible manifestations of the double standard, it was the only country in the world not allowed to announce its own capital. I hope we see the beginning of the end of that. And for the Israeli people, they will be treated like first-class citizens of the world.
And it also tells Israel's enemies, this is their capital, the American embassy's here, now deal with it.
Meanwhile, thousands of Palestinians rioted along the Israeli-Gaza border to protest the embassy move and also mark what they call the Nakba, the catastrophe that befell Palestinians when Israel was created. During the riots, Gazan officials said more than 50 died and hundreds more were wounded. The IDF dropped thousands of leaflets warning protesters to stay away from the border and blame the Hamas terror group for the uprising.
We will not tolerate this violence. We will continue to defend our sovereignty, our civilians, and our border. We will do so while trying to minimize the amount of casualties, but we will not let the rioters through and to harm Israeli civilians that are a running distance away.
Israel said captured Gazans told them Hamas encourages children to cross the fence. They said they want the riots to be seen internationally as a popular uprising and not inspired by Hamas. Chris Mitchell, CBN News at the new U.S. Embassy, Jerusalem.
Well, in other news, in our nation's capital, Vice President Mike Pence celebrated Israel's 70th anniversary with Christian and Jewish leaders. George Thomas has more on that.
That's right, Pat. Vice President addressed a ceremony hosted by Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer. There he prayed for the peace of Jerusalem and pledged that the Trump administration will always be an ally of the Jewish state.
One unalterable truth stands in evidence at this gathering and all across the world. As it has been in the past, so it shall be in the future. America stands with Israel.
Pence also honored President Trump for strengthening ties between the U.S. and Israel. Stay with CBNnews.com for complete coverage of Israel's 70th anniversary and the historic embassy move. First Lady Melania Trump is recovering at Walter Reed Medical Center after being treated for what's been described as a benign kidney condition. Doctors performed a procedure to plug a blood vessel and stop bleeding. In the afternoon, President Trump boarded Marine One to visit her. A senior administration official said the president wasn't by his side for the procedure, but he spoke with her beforehand and with her doctors immediately after. The First Lady is expected to spend the next several days in the hospital. The Supreme Court is ushering in a new era of sports betting. States now have the go-ahead to allow sports gambling across the nation. The Supreme Court struck down a federal law from 1992 that banned the practice in most states. Some governors are hoping this will help solve state budget problems. Observers note that the court's strong defense of states' rights doesn't bode well for the president's immigration policies, notably its attempts to crack down on sanctuary cities, which give certain legal protections to immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. A volcanic disaster is brewing on the Big Island of Hawaii with 19 lava outbreaks, a jungle on fire, and evacuations. As my colleague Dale Hurd reports, the worst could still lie ahead.
The ground on Hawaii's Big Island continues to crack open, spewing 2,000-degree lava. And now the volcano itself appears ready to explode. One of the newest fissures is shooting up what geologists call splatter bombs, 500 feet into the air.
I've actually seen rocks fly over the tree line.
The eruptions, which sound like thunderclaps, are deafening.
I heard what sounded like a jet turbine.
19 fissures have opened here in this corner of Hawaii's Big Island since early May, and fresh eruptions last weekend have forced new evacuations. More than 30 buildings have been destroyed and 2,000 have been evacuated from their homes, and officials warn thousands more could be ordered to leave.
We would like them to be ready and prepared to evacuate at a moment's notice.
The fissures are also spewing dangerous sulfur dioxide, which has residents lining up for respirators.
Not everybody can just get on a plane and leave. Some people can and some people are, but the rest of us, we're here.
The plumes of poisonous gas are killing off trees and grasses left untouched by the lava. All eyes are now on this crater where a lava lake has collapsed more than 1,000 feet. If it reaches groundwater, that could generate steam-driven explosions, powerful enough to send rocks the size of trucks a half-mile or more in the air.
It's not like it's a hurricane where you think, okay, in 3 days it'll be here and go. This is almost like a slow-motion train wreck.
The U.S. Geological Survey warns there are 169 potentially active volcanoes across the United States, and about 50 of them in 6 states are being watched closely. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Pat, those are some dramatic images. And to imagine there are currently about 169 potentially active volcanoes across the United States.
Well, you know, it's all tied into what is known as the Ring of Fire. The whole Pacific area is well, around the edge is what's called the Ring of Fire, and it goes all the way from New Zealand and Indonesia down into Santiago in Chile. You can see that on your screen. Well, the west coast of the United States is extremely vulnerable, and I read a very perceptive article on this entire thing. The whole idea of that Cascadia subduction is one that could send walls of water throughout the Pacific Northwest that literally flood thousands of acres and bring about, well, tens of millions, even billions of dollars worth of damage in that area. So Mount Rainier and Mount Shasta and these other mountains along the Pacific coast in Oregon and Washington State are part of that Ring of Fire. And, you know, the whole Hawaiian Islands, it was a volcano from under the ground, under the earth, that brought forth those islands. And it's all volcanic, and it's a terrible thing, but it could, if it spreads to the United States, it's bad news. So, Wendy, I don't want to be an alarmist, but those who are experts, this Cascadia effect is something that's very, very serious.
Yeah. Like I said, the price you pay for living in paradise.
Well, it's the price you pay for living around the water. I mean, I'm sure it's beautiful, but I mean, this thing is very serious. And the so-called tsunami, when it hits, I remember that Indonesian tsunami, it was so horrible. But there was one earthquake under the Pacific Ocean, and when that happens, I mean, terrible things can go on, you know. It's just an earthquake, and then suddenly this wall of water comes roaring across the land.